The Ballon d'Or. One of the most prestigious individual accolades, awarded annually to the player deemed to have delivered the most outstanding performance over the preceding season. This is the award that marks the pinnacle of outstanding performance in the world of football.
It's called soccer, not football.
What?
Football is played with your hands and you tackle people. The United States invented sports, so we get to choose.
Oh, shut up, nigga.
So coming in at the number 3 spot for 2005, you have to give it to the fireball kid Takanori Gomi. 5 wins within a very short span in 2005. 3 of these wins coming by way of finish. Yeah, man, you can't argue against it. At that number 2 spot, I'm gonna give it to GSP, man. 2005, he wasn't even the champion in this year, but it was certainly a very good year for him. 4 wins in this year, including 3 by way of finish, and wins over Frank Trigg and Sean Shirk. Those are 2 very solid wins right there. But of course, at number 1, none other than Mauricio Shogun Hua. It cannot be anyone else. This guy got 5 wins within this year. 2 of them were on the same night, and that includes wins over Overeem, Nogueira, Rampage Jackson, and he beat Overeem and Arona, both by finish, both on the exact same night. That's insane. It can't be anyone else apart from him, man. At the number 3 spot, I'm going to give it to Yoshihiro Nakayama. 6 fights within 2006. One of them did end up being a no contest, but apart from that, 5 wins, 5 finishes. There's no arguing with that. He has to be in the top 3 at least. And of course, he can also boast that 2 wins in one night accolade, as he finished Smirnovas and Manhoef in the same night. At the number 2 spot, you have to give it to Mirko Cro Cop. This list just would not be right without him. In 2006, he had 4 wins, 4 finishes, including 2 wins in one night, of course. 1 against Vanderlei Silva and 1 against Josh Barnett. That is insane. You have to have him in the top 3 for 2006 for sure. But of course, at the number 1 spot, I think it's right to give it to Chuck Liddell. 3 title wins in 2006, including a KO over Randy Couture and a TKO over Tito Ortiz. Yeah, man, 2006 was definitely Chuck Liddell's year. At the number 3 spot, I'ma put Randy Couture, man. Look, after having just been knocked out by Chuck Liddell, he came back in 2007, got 2 decent wins over Tim Sylvia and a win over Gabriel Gonzaga. 2 very decent wins at a weight class which he was very undersized for, if we're being realistic. But at that number 2 spot, I'm going to give it to Anderson Silva. This was a very good year for him. 3 wins, 3 finishes, including a win over Rich Franklin for the title. But he also had a TKO over Nate Marquardt and a TKO over Travis Lutter. Very good. But just not good enough to get that number 1 spot that Rampage Jackson holds, in my opinion. Look, man, 3 wins in this year, including a massive upset KO against Chuck Liddell. He also defended the belt against Dan Henderson, and he also got a KO over Marvin Eastman in the beginning of that year. So 3 wins, 3 very, very good performances, and that's when Rampage gets the number 1 spot, in my opinion. At that number 3 spot, I'm going to have to give it to Gegard Mousasi. 6 wins in 2008, including 5 finishes, and of course, 2 wins in one night against Manhoef and Souza. At that number 2 spot, I'm going to give it to Rashad Evans. He did only get 2 wins, but he did get a KO against Chuck Liddell and a TKO over Forrest Griffin. 2 very, very good wins. Certainly a very good year for Rashad Evans. But at that number 1 spot, I think I do have to give it to Anderson the Spider Silva. He was a machine in 2008. He got 3 wins and 3 finishes in 2008, including Dan Henderson, James Irvin, and Patrick Cote. Very good year for Anderson Silva. At the number 3 spot, I'll give it to GSP. Not a crazy active year for GSP, but he did get 2 wins in this year, including 1 over Thiago Alves, 1 over BJ Penn, and he did basically break BJ Penn. So decent year for GSP, not the most active, but at that number 2 spot, I've got Lyoto Machida. In this year, Lyoto got 3 wins, including 2 finishes, a win over Rashad Evans, and a UD over Mauricio Hua, a very, very good win. and he also got a KO over Thiago Silva, and he won the title in this year as well. So yeah, very, very good year for Lyoto Machida. But I do reserve that number 1 spot for Jose Aldo Jr. In this year, he had 4 wins in the WEC, including 4 finishes, and 3 of them being in the first round, 1 of them being in flipping 8 seconds. This was a very good year for Jose Aldo. You know, he had some decent wins as well. Cub Swanson was no joke back in the day. People forget, man. You know, and also some other guys, to be honest. I don't know who these guys are, but 4 wins, 4 finishes, 4 title wins, I think, as well, probably. So there you go. So coming in at number 3 for 2010, I'll give it to Jim Miller. In 2010, Jim Miller had 4 fights, 4 wins, 2 finishes, and a finish over Charles Oliveira. As we know, this is a win that has aged very well, so it was a very good year for Jim Miller. At the number 2 spot, I will give it to Dominic Cruz. In 2010, he was able to get 3 wins, including a win over Scott Jorgensen and Joseph Benavidez. It was a pretty decent year for him. But at that number 1 spot, I will give it to Cain Velasquez. 2 wins, 2 finishes, including a KO over Big Nog and a TKO against Brock Lesnar. That is a serious win right there. At the number 3 spot, I'll give it to Donald Cerrone. 5 fights in 2011. The only reason he's not higher is just because he did get that loss against Nate Diaz at the end of the year. But he did have, before that, 4 wins, 3 finishes, including 1 over Charles Oliveira. Very good year for Donald Cerrone. At that number 2 spot, I will give it to Dan Henderson. 3 fights in 2011, including a TKO against Rafael Cavalcante, a TKO against Fedor Emelianenko, and a UD against Shogun. This was a seriously good year for Dan Henderson. But at number 1, of course, it has to be Jon Jones, absolutely no doubt. 4 fights, 4 wins, 4 finishes, and he also won the belt in 2011 against Shogun, defended twice against Rampage and Lyoto Machida. Wow, man, this was an amazing year for Jon Jones. This is the Jon Jones that was the GOAT, man. If this Jon Jones just carried on throughout his entire career, 100% he'll be the undisputed GOAT. At the number 3 spot, I would put Demetrius Johnson. 3 fights, he did go undefeated, and he did, of course, win that belt against Joseph Benavidez. But yeah, a decent year for DJ. At the number 2 spot for 2012, I would put Jon Jones. 2 title defenses, including a submission against Vitor Belfort and a UD against Rashad Evans. He definitely did get challenged in this year, but very good. But that number 1 spot, I would give to Benson Henderson. 3 fights, 3 wins, including 2 wins against Frankie Edgar and a title defense against Nate Diaz. So a very good year for Benson Henderson. Number 3, I would give it to Chris Weidman. 2 wins against Anderson Silva, literally snapping that 16 fight win streak, finally defeating that level 100 boss of Anderson Silva. No one else could do it, and then after this, Anderson Silva was never the same. The second best for 2013, I would give to Belfort. 3 fights, 3 wins, 3 knockouts, including wins over Michael Bisping, Luke Rockhold, and Dan Henderson. Wow, man, those are some of the best wins you can possibly get at a division for the time. You know, was he kind of steroided up? I don't know, maybe. But for the number 1 spot, I would definitely give it to Mighty Mouse. 3 wins in this year, including 2 finishes, a submission against John Moraga, and an amazing KO against Joseph Benavidez. Just slept him out cold. And obviously a UD against John Dodson. So some of the best in the division at the time. Definitely a very good year for Demetrius Johnson. The third best fighter in 2014 was TJ Dillashaw. This is the year where he had 3 wins, including that shocking upset KO against Renan Barão, and then he also got a head kick KO against Joe Soto later on in that year. So definitely a great year for TJ Dillashaw. For the number 2 spot, I would go for Donald Cerrone. 4 wins, including wins over Edson Barboza, Jim Miller, and Eddie Alvarez. So a very, very good year for Cerrone. But at the number 1 spot, I'll give it to Robbie Lawler. He had 4 fights in 2014. At the beginning, he did, lose to Johnny Hendricks, but he came back. He TKO'd Jake Ellenberger. He had a UD against Matt Brown, and then he won the belt later that year against Johnny Hendricks. So he was the best fighter in this year. At the number 3 spot for 2015, we have DJ. 2 wins in 2015, including a last-second submission against Kyoji Horiguchi and another, UD against John Dodson. 2 very decent wins. At the number 2 spot for 2015, I'll go with RDA. He did have 2 wins this year, including a title win against Anthony Pettis, where he dominated Anthony Pettis. And then he had also his first defense against Donald Cerrone, where he knocked him out in 1 round. And this was a very, very good version of Cerrone, like a very in-prime type Cerrone. But at the number 1 spot, of course, who else other than Notorious? 3 wins in 2015. That's crazy to even say out loud because, you know, he hasn't even fought in the last 5 years. Yeah, man, 3 finishes, 3 wins. 1 against Dennis Silva, then he won the interim title against Chad Mendes, and obviously his legendary 13-second knockout against Jose Aldo. This is a very, very clear win for 2015 for Conor McGregor. For the number 3 best in 2016, I will go for Stipe. 3 wins, 3 finishes in 2016, including a TKO against former champ Andrei Arlovski. Then he fought for the belt against Fabricio Verdum and knocked him out in 1 round. And then he defended against Alistair Overeem and knocked him out in 1 round as well. Amazing year for Stipe. For the number 2 spot, I'm going to go for Cody Garbrandt. 2016 was an amazing year for him. He had 4 fights, 3 finishes in the first round. And then that one that wasn't a finish was a UD against Dominic Cruz. One of the most spectacular title fight performances of all time, as we know. Very entertaining fight and an amazing performance. After this, he did have a bit of a fall off, but 2016 was definitely his year. He was very close. I was going to put him number 1, but I do think that number 1 spot goes to Michael Bisping. 3 fights, 3 wins, including a UD against Anderson Silva where he almost got knocked out, and then he came back and, you know, won the fight. And then he fought short notice against Luke Rockhold, knocked him out in the first round, crazy upset KO, and then he defended against Dan Henderson. It was close between him and Cody Garbrandt, but I do just think he beat better opponents. I mean, Cody Garbrandt kind of fought nobodies before that Dominic Cruz fight, so yeah, I would give it to Michael Bisping for the number 1 spot in 2016. At the number 3 spot, RDA is on the list again. 3 fights, 3 wins, including a submission against a very decent version of Neil Magny and a UD against Robbie Lawler. And then obviously earlier in that year, he got a UD against Tarek Safadine. Yeah, man, it was a pretty decent year for RDA. At the number 2 spot, Max Holloway makes an appearance. 2 fights, 2 wins, 2 TKOs, 2 round 3 TKOs against Aldo. So, yeah, very good year for him. And at number 1 spot, I will probably give it to GSP. Only 1 win, but it was against Michael Bisping in a weight class above his normal one. And he was coming off like a 3 or 4 year layoff. And he dominated him in spectacular fashion. He got that belt. I know it's not exactly the best middleweight champion to have, you know, got that second belt against, but a champion is a champion. At that number 3 spot, I have to give it to Adesanya. An amazing year for him. 4 fights, 4 wins, including a win over Marvin Vettori, Brad Tavares, and Derek Brunson. Some pretty decent wins, and obviously 4 wins in the year, you can't complain with that. At number 2, you know I couldn't leave this guy out. Khabib Nurmagomedov, 2 fights, 2 wins. He won the belt against Al Iaquinta early in that year, and then he submitted Conor McGregor in October of that year. Obviously one of the most legendary fight rivalries of all time. So Khabib, he had to be number 2 on this list at least. But I just couldn't not put DC at number 1 for 2018. 3 fights, 3 wins, 3 finishes. Early in that year, he had a finish against Volkan Oezdemir to defend that light heavyweight title. Then he went up to heavyweight, fought Stipe, KO'd him, and then he had a defense against Derek Lewis later in that year. So man, this is an amazing year for DC. He had to be number 1. I'm sorry, Khabib. At the number 3 spot, I will give it to Henry Cejudo. 2 fights in this year, including a defense of his flyweight title against TJ Dillashaw in a fight night, which was insane. I don't know how a title fight is ever happening in a fight night. But anyway, and then the second fight of that year was against Marlon Moraes at bantamweight, where he knocked him out, or TKO'd him, and then he became the double champ. So yeah, I have to give it to Cejudo. If you're becoming a double champion that year, you can't not be on the list. Number 2, I will give it to Israel Adesanya. 3 fights, 3 wins, including Anderson Silva, Kelvin Gastelum, and then Robert Whittaker for that strap. And he knocked out Whittaker in emphatic fashion, so he had to be on this list. But at number 1, you guessed it, you've seen the thumbnail, you've seen my flipping YouTube channel name and banner and stuff. It's Jorge Masvidal. 3 fights, 3 wins, 3 finishes. He got a KO against Darren Till, which was a very big win at the time. Then obviously the legendary 4-second or 5-second KO against Ben Askren of the flying knee, and then later in that year the first ever BMF champion TKO doctor stoppage against Nate Diaz, just battered him. So I mean, call me biased, but you guys know that no one else deserves it in 2019, the number one spot apart from him. So yeah, he's the number one for 2019. So at that number 3 spot, I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev. 3 fights, 3 wins, including the legendary 10-day turnaround. And he got 2 finishes within that time. Like I just said, 2 fights in 10 days, and he won both of them by finish. And then he also got a KO in the first round against Gerald Meerschaert. So yeah, very good win, and this was a year that definitely propelled his career. Number 2, I have to give him his flowers. It's Kevin Holland. 5 fights and 5 wins. Man, 5 fights in 1 year is basically unheard of in the modern era, but he did it, and he got some amazing wins that have aged incredibly. Obviously, he had that crazy KO over Souza, and he also had 2 TKOs against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, who might go on to fight for the middleweight title now, and a KO over Joaquin Buckley. That is a win that's aged very well, and obviously, you know, Joaquin Buckley went on to fight Kamaru Usman. So yeah, amazing year for Kevin Holland. But at the number 1 spot, I will give it to Davison Figueiredo. 4 fights in 2020, including 1 draw, and the other 3 were finishes. You know, famously, he had the quickest title turnaround, I think it was, because he fought at UFC 255, and then he literally fought straight after that at 256. Obviously, where he had that draw against Brandon Moreno. But apart from that, he had 2 finishes over Joseph Benavidez and a finish over Alex Perez. So a very, very good year for him, and he's the winner. So for that number 3 spot, I'm going to give it to Cyril Gahn. 3 fights, 3 wins, including wins over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Then he had a UD against Alexander Volkov, a very good win there. And then he had a TKO against Derek Lewis. So yeah, very good year for him. The number 2 spot I will give to Charles do Bronx Oliveira. 2 fights, 2 wins, including a TKO against Michael Chandler and a submission against Dustin Poirier. But number 1, of course, it has to be Kamaru Usman. 3 fights, 3 wins, including a TKO against Gilbert Burns, an amazing KO against Jorge Masvidal, and then a UD against Kobe Covington in the rematch. So yeah, very good year, and definitely Usman was the best in this year. At the number 3 spot, I'm going to give it to Alexander Volkanovski. 2 fights, 1 TKO against the Korean Zombie early in that year, and then an absolutely dominating performance against Max Holloway in that trilogy fight. Definitely his best fight, or his best performance out of all 3 fights. At the number 2 spot, it has to be Alex Pereira. 3 fights, 3 wins, including 2 finishes, a finish over Sean Strickland, a finish over Israel Adesanya. You can't complain with that. But at the number 1 spot, I'm going to give it to Islam Makhachev. This was the year where he won that title. Obviously, earlier in that year, he did have a TKO against Bobby Green in the first round, and then obviously the legendary submission against Charles Oliveira for that title. So yeah, I'm going to give him the number 1 spot for this year. Coming in at number 3 is Leon Rocky Edwards. 2 fights in this year, including a majority decision against Kamaru Usman in that trilogy fight. Definitely a shock performance for a lot of people, and then that kind of boring UD against Kobe Covington. At the number 2 spot, Islam Makhachev makes another appearance. 2 fights in this year, including 2 wins over Alexander Volkanovski. That first one, people like to call it a robbery, but cry about it, it was not a robbery. And then that second fight, obviously he silenced all the haters, got that KO head kick. So yeah, I was going to put him number 1, but I think it's only fair to give that number 1 spot to Sean Strickland. 3 fights, 3 wins, including a UD on short notice against Nasruddin Imamov, which is a win that has aged greatly. Then a TKO against Abu Sufyan Magomedov, and then obviously that short notice title fight against Adesanya, where he dog walked Adesanya. That was one of the biggest shock title performances of all time. So yeah, he's definitely number 1 for this year. At the number 3 spot, I'm going to go for Joaquin Buckley. After moving down to welterweight, he had 4 wins in 2024. 4 fights in general is quite unseen in the modern era, and he got 4 wins, including wins over Stephen Thompson. He had a brutal KO over Stephen Thompson. He also TKO'd Vicente Luque, doctor stoppage against Kobe Covington, and then obviously a UD against Nursultan Ruziboyev. So yeah, very, very good year for Joaquin Buckley. At the number 2 spot, I'm going to go for Ilia Topuria. 2 fights, 2 wins, 2 knockouts over the 2 best featherweights of all time. You can't argue with it. But for number 1, it would be a disservice not to put Alex Pereira as number 1. 3 fights, 3 wins, 3 title wins, and 3 knockouts. I mean, you literally cannot argue with that. And some of the best wins in the division. Obviously, Jamal Hill, in retrospect, it's not an amazing win, but obviously it was at that massive UFC 300 card. Then he had that rematch with Yuri. A lot of people were doubting him for that first fight. You know, it was an early stoppage and he left absolutely no doubts in there. And then that absolutely brutal finish over Khalil Roundtree, and that win's only going to age, you know, even better and better as time goes on. So yeah, there it is. So at the number 3 spot, I did go for Khamzat. I was going to go for Pantoja, but I do think Khamzat's title win this year was more impressive than Pantoja's. Obviously, Khamzat had that one title win a few weeks ago against Dricus du Plessis, so he is at number 3. At the number 2 spot, I will go for Ilia Topuria. He had that KO over Charles Oliveira a few months ago, so yeah, of course, he has to be at number 2. But at the number 1 spot, who else could it be other than Merab? 2 fights already this year, and he had that finish over Sean O'Malley, the UD against Umar Nurmagomedov, both very entertaining performances, and he is booked at UFC 320 against Corey Sandhagen. I do see him beating Corey Sandhagen, of course, and if he does, then I can't lie, it's kind of undisputable for him to be number 1 for this year. But I will say though, if Islam Makhachev is able to beat JDM in November, he can shoot up on this list. Maybe he's at number 2, maybe he's even number 1. So overall, it's actually quite surprising to say that the number 1 spot for every single year since 2005 has been different. There hasn't been a single repeat on my list anyway. But if we do count the top 3, which I have done for every single year, the person that's featured the most on this list, so the fighters that have appeared twice on the list are John Jones, Khamzat Chimaev, Alex Pereira, Islam Makhachev, Israel Adesanya, Rafael Dos Anjos, Donald Cerrone, and Anderson Silva. And then the fighters that have appeared 3 times, GSP and Demetrius Johnson. So this is what the overall leaderboard looks like. GSP and DJ, they're the ultimate Ballon d'Or MMA winners. Congratulations. So there it is for my MMA Ballon d'Or list, aka the best fighter from each year since 2005. Please do let me know in the comment section down below what you think of my list. Have I missed anyone? I know there's a few names I probably should have got in there, like Fedor or something. I do think Fedor's prime years were kind of like 2003, 2004. And obviously I wasn't following MMA back in like 2007, so I wouldn't exactly know, you know, who was the best back then. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below whoever I missed. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, comment, share, subscribe. It took bloody ages to make this video because obviously I had to plan top 3 for every single year since 2005. That's 20 years, bro. 2005 was 20 years. That's 20 or 21 years, yeah? So please do share with anyone that you think would enjoy this type of content. Turn on that post notification bell so you get notified every time I upload. And yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys next time. Safe.